So the BBC have come under fire and criticism because they released a documentary about, it was called Surviving a War Zone, and it follows a child in Gaza. Turns out that the people involved in narrating it, including the child, had direct links to Hamas. Yes, this child, who was meant to just be some innocent Gazan, was the son of a Hamas minister. The BBC now are coming under scrutiny, attack. The leader of the opposition in the UK has called for an inquiry into the BBC, but it's just gone a lot worse. See, up until now, the BBC are saying, we didn't know their connections to Hamas. Sure. But let's just say and indulge them and say that's true. Well then, if you want to say it's just an accidental mistake, how do they explain the fact that they have clearly, deliberately mistranslated words of these Gazans? They've changed references of Jews and translated the Arabic to being about Israelis. And they've mistranslated the word jihad to being about fighting and resistance. Have a watch. This is just so clear of the BBC's direct complicity to whitewash the anti-Semitism and genocidal hatred of the Jews that lies at the core of this conflict. Have a watch.
بس أكدت لنا هاي الفيديوهات إنه هو ما كانش متخبي تحت الأرض، إنه بالعكس هو بقاوم بجاهد ضد اليهود. بس. Okay, so now that's how they translated it in the video. Now this is the actual translation. So here she says, but the video shows that he was let's just get it up. The video shows that he was fighting and resisting Israeli forces. Now let's watch here. بس أكدت لنا هاي الفيديوهات إنه هو ما كانش متخبي تحت الأرض، إنه بالعكس هو بقاوم بجاهد ضد اليهود.
So here in this clip you can see that she's referring to fighting against the Jews and jihad. So let's be clear. This now represents direct complicity of the BBC with Hamas. Direct lying propaganda. You know, I saw someone reference this, and this person was, frankly, I always knew he was actually at school with me. He's a liberal. And he said, I've got to be honest, it's very, very hard to see how anyone can look at this and not think that actually there's direct complicity from Hamas here. Now, I want to explain to you about why the BBC would do this and why it proves that what they're doing is propaganda and it's complicit. This actually gets to the core of the whole conflict. They present it as it's being about Israel, about an Israeli state, and they're just resisting. The second that you make it about Jews and jihad means that it's not about that anymore. It actually changes the whole narrative around the conflict. See, the Palestinian cause characterizes itself falsely as a lie, but it characterizes itself as being about resistance, about a legitimate grievance. We're not against Jews. This isn't a religious thing. You just took our land. That's what it's all about. So they characterize it as a legitimate grievance, and that has to be the fundamental narrative that the Palestinians need and the Western activists buy into in order to support their cause. But the second actually you realize, as you do if you actually translated it properly, that this has nothing to do with self-determination and nationalism for some kind of unique people. Nothing to do about being displaced from land, that really this is about Islamist expansion and an age-old anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews. The whole narrative crumbles and the truth reigns. So therefore, it is, in my mind, indisputable that what the BBC have done is to be complicit with Hamas, to help one side. In some ways, I'd say they're probably breaching terrorism here. They're helping terrorists and a violent extremist movement by helping them whitewash what they're doing. It's completely outrageous. But it really gets to the heart of everything. See, they want to say, and it's a complete lie, the argument goes on the Palestinian side, well, the Zionists came here and they kicked us out, so we're just fighting back because we want our own state. We want statehood. We are a unique people in a unique land, and that's what we want. The reason why this argument ultimately fails is very simple. It comes down to this map. This is what Israel would have looked like, God forbid, had the war in 1948 been lost by Israel. Jordan would have had a chunk of the land, Egypt would have a chunk, Syria would have a chunk, Lebanon would have a chunk. No Palestinian state. Similarly, between 1948 to 67, Jordan controlled Judea and Samaria, Egypt controlled Gaza. They didn't try and create a Palestinian state, they just illegally occupied it. And there were no calls for a Palestinian state there. Then once again, the Arabs tried to destroy Israel in 67. They lost. They lost again in 73. And so they start developing this narrative of, oh, we're actually the Palestinians. They saw themselves as Arabs. In 1947, the United Nations said we'll have an Arab state and a Jewish state, not a Palestinian state. So the whole idea of they're a unique people and they just want statehood and that's it, it's so clearly just a cynical ploy in order to undermine and get rid of the Jewish state. So that, to me, this moment with what the BBC did, it is in some ways epitomizes the very dichotomy of how one views the conflict. It just came out recently that this was the state that Ehud Olmert offered in 2008 to the Palestinians, to Mahmoud Abbas, which he rejected. On the right is Abbas's sketch of the offer. And here you can see this is what a state would have looked like for the Palestinians. You'd have basically the entirety of Judea and Samaria and Gaza and a tunnel linking the two. And they said no. Thank God they said no, by the way. And we've seen with what happened in Gaza, where they had a mini state of their own, where they could have elections and they voted in Hamas, that's what would happen ultimately, had they had an entire Palestinian state on both sides. Because it shows what they did with Hamas on October 7th and their support of it shows they're not interested in statehood and self-determination, human rights and all those things and just dignity. They're interested in the age-old hatred. They're interested in jihad. They're interested in Islamist expansionism. And they're interested in hating Jews. And that's why the BBC mistranslated, intentionally, what was said there. Because ultimately it reveals the truth behind the Palestinian cause, which is that it is not about a legitimate grievance. It is about a violent, ideological hatred of the Jewish people.
Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.